welcome to this session of NUGGET 2023. My name is James Michaelis, one of the product managers here at Netreo, focused on our APM tools. I'm also joined here by Todd Lair, one of the development managers on the Retrace team. So as we jump into this session, I first wanted to go through some of the trends that we're seeing in the industry, specifically around serverless architectures and the emergence of OpenTelemetry. Then we'll take a look at our responses to these trends. And finally, Todd will give us a walkthrough of how to send OTel data into Retrace. While engaging with our current and prospective customers, we at Retrace have seen a trend. This trend is a movement from the more traditional physical server, whether it be a self-managed or cloud instance like EC2 instances or Azure VMs, to more of a serverless approach. This modern and emerging architecture includes containerized environments within different cloud providers like AWS, GCP, or Azure. We are seeing functions and serverless computing being used to execute different logic, services, or transactions related to their applications as these containerized functions continue to grow. As serverless adoption continues to take place, the ability to monitor and observe all the different services related to your application becomes even more important. We've also seen a change in the world of observability and in the emergence of OpenTelemetry. And as many of you know, OpenTelemetry, or OTel, is an open source standard for collecting telemetry such as traces, metrics, or logs from your applications. And since OpenTelemetry is vendor agnostic, once the telemetry data is collected, it can then be used by a number of different observability tools. As OpenTelemetry continues to be adopted in all of these serverless environments that we discussed earlier, we're quickly seeing that OTel is becoming the standard in observability. And for this reason, we really do believe that OTel is the future. So this brings us to the Retrace OTel Appliance. This OTel Appliance is something that's added to your cloud infrastructure alongside the applications that you want to monitor, and is configured to stream your existing OTel data into Retrace. And through the installation of the appliance, minimal changes are needed to convert this OTel data into Retrace's data format. Once you have OTel data coming from your serverless platforms, and it makes it into the Retrace platform, you're then able to take advantage of all the existing Retrace monitoring functionality that you know today. Things like app scores, key transaction monitors, log query monitors, the custom dashboards, and so on. And with that said, I'm now going to hand it over to Todd Lair to walk us through how you can get your OTel data into Retrace. And in this particular example, we're going to look at how to get data into AWS Lambda Functions. And as always, as questions come up along the way, feel free to ask in the chat and we'll get to them as we go. With that said, Todd, did you want to go ahead?
Okay, thank you, James. For our demo, we're going to be configuring an EC2 instance that's running Linux and Docker. This is going to act as our Retrace OTel appliance. This appliance can also be hosted in Kubernetes or anywhere that supports Docker container images, but for the purpose of this, we'll use an EC2 instance with Docker that's running. After that, we're going to create a Lambda function in Python that's configured to send OpenTelemetry data to that Retrace OTel appliance that we just created so that we can see our telemetry data in Retrace. So let's start. We can go and install Retrace, and we need to get this activation key. And we need to create a Docker Compose file for our image. And we will be using the Stackify Retrace OTel agent latest. We have the ports mapped to 8443 for OTel HTTP and 8444 for gRPC. We won't be using gRPC, but it is possible if the function supports it. We need to put our activation key into here, and we also need to be naming our environment. We will take this, and then we can put that on our machine. And we save this. And then we can just do docker compose up. And you'll notice the appliance is up and running. And that's all we need for the first part. Now, for the second part, we will be configuring a Lambda function. And for the purpose of this, we will be starting with the documentation that is provided by AWS and OpenTelemetry for how to configure the ADOT collector inside of a Lambda function. So for that, first we will go here and we need to create a function. And we will make sure that it's on the right language. We also need to change this role to use an existing role that we already have. This isn't always necessary. It completely depends on your environment. And then we can create this function. Okay, so now we have a basic function. Python is nice because the function will get created for you without having to do many other things to upload it. So the first thing that we need to do is add the layer for the ADOT collector for Python into here, which is here. Okay, and now we need to go to our configuration. The first thing we need to do is enable X-ray monitoring on this. If you would like to use X-ray, this isn't a requirement, but in a later step, you'll see that we have X-ray enabled. We need to go to the environment variables, and there's 3 environment variables that need to be added here. The first one is the AWS exec Lambda wrapper, and that needs to be set to this, which, as I mentioned, can be found in the documentation here from the OTel documentation. Then we need to add our configuration file for the collector layer that we just added. We will use this, and I will explain this configuration file here in a minute. And then we also need the protocol on which we plan to export our OTel data. This is not required for all functions, but for Python, we want to be using the protobuf protocol. So we will save that. And then now we also need to do an optional step, which is add this to a VPC configuration. This is solely depends on your environment and how your traffic communicates with various things. In our environment, we have things a little more locked down. Okay, now we can see that all of our environment variables are set. We have everything good to go. Now the only other thing that we need to do is we do need to create a configuration file for the collector. And this is for Lambda. As I mentioned, you can get this default documentation from the documentation that's provided over here at the bottom. there is a section about this configuration file, and there are defaults that are included in here and the environment variables that need to go with it. So for our configuration, the EC2 instance that we were using has an IP address of this, and we're using port 8443 to receive that traffic. So we added an OTel HTTP retrace exporter to this configuration. Here's where we also have X-ray set, but this isn't a requirement. And then down here, we also need to make sure that we add the OTel HTTP retrace exporter to both the traces and the logs. Once we have that, we can save this file on disk. And then we need to go back to our S3 bucket and upload that. As you can see, I have that uploaded here already. But for the purpose of this, we'll just delete this and re-upload it. Upload. Okay, so now we're ready to run a test execution of our Lambda function, which requires no inputs really at all. So we can come over here and hit test. We will see that it successfully exported information to our collector. If we go to our appliance, we should be able to see some protobuf messages came in here. And shortly after that, we should see data show up in Retrace. So we will test this a few more times just to generate some more traffic. We can see we generated more traffic here. And then once the routine runs, we should be able to see this in our Retrace account. So we'll go back to Retrace. We can go to servers. We can see that we have some servers connected here. Our environment for this was the Retrace OTel NUGGET, Retrace OTel NUGGET, and if we go to all of our applications, we can see our Python function has showed up here. Eventually, we will also get trace data reported for this as well. So here we are, our function is reporting to Retrace now, and we can see that we have APM data in here. We're able to see our server requests, and then we have all of the traces that were outputted from our function. That concludes our demo. Thank you very much for watching, and if there's any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Todd, for walking us through that. Before we close, I just wanted to let you know of where you can learn more about the OTel appliance. If you're an existing Retrace customer and are interested in learning more and giving this a try, we have some GitHub links that you can check out. The one on the left is some examples of existing implementations across several different supported programming languages. And the one on the right is really just a great sample app if you're new to OTel, and it's a good getting started resource for you. And then finally, if you're new to Retrace altogether, we'd love to have you start a trial. It's free and easy, and it's a great tool to use to better monitor all of your applications. So thank you everybody for watching, and have a great day.